Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to the latest and greatest edition of the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts. I will have a special guest joining me in just a little bit, but he's running a little late. That's all right. It's a Sunday afternoon. We're just chilling here. Sunday evening, actually, excuse me. We're just chilling here. Thanks to all who have already joined us. Got Afton, George, Steeler Chick 46, Vinny. Man, we got everybody in here. All the faithful. Robert Cotting, thank you, Robert, for joining us. Man, it's going to be great today. We're going to have a fun show. A lot of stuff happening around the league today. Got some updates on some players across the NFL that are making moves. The Titans adding DeAndre Hopkins to their wide receiver room after a much storied trip for Hopkins around, trying to figure out where he's going to land next and make an impact for a team. So he lands in Tennessee, who, I don't know, the Steelers are going to have to play them this year. We're going to see how that team looks, how that offense looks. And they did add a fantastic piece, though, in DeAndre Hopkins. And then you had other news like the Jaguars getting Evan Ingram off the franchise tag and into a long-term contract. Fantastic stuff for the Jaguars. They're looking like a team that is ready to compete for several years to come with a loaded offense and a defense that was on the rise at portions of the end of the season. Put it together in the second half of the wild card round against the Chargers to move on to play Kansas City. So they are locking up players. Looks like, though, we're still waiting on news for Saquon Barkley and the running back out of Dallas, whose name is escaping me right now. I keep wanting to say Tony Dorsett, but that is most definitely not him. So help me out there if somebody in the comments is listening to this and thinking, why can't this dude figure out this guy's name? Tony Pollard. There it is. Okay. So I'm sure somebody will post that in the comments here to help me out. But thank you guys again for joining. Like I said, Andrew Wilbar, my co-host for the Steelers Fix that runs on Tuesday afternoons at noon. You can check that out anywhere you get your podcast. He will be on shortly, just finishing up some things, I think, at church to finish out his evening, and then he will join me here. But we're going to talk about some Steelers stuff, not all these other teams like I started out with, but just want to kind of get that out of the way. Man, it's going to be fun to see this Steelers team in action in just under 56 days now. We're going to get to see training camp here soon. If you're going to training camp, let me know in the comments section. That's going to be, as always, just an absolutely rocking time for Pittsburgh Steelers fans to go see their team practicing and learning the ropes as they prep for in-season work. I had kind of a topic in mind today that you guys can feel free to ask questions about. If you have questions about any Steelers topic or anything NFL, fantasy football, whatever you want to talk about, that's what I'm here for. And actually, I've got my guy coming on the show. He just loaded up, and so I'm going to add him in here.
How's it going?
Andrew Wilbar, welcome in, man. Looking spiffy.
Thank you. Just got out of church, so a little bit late. This guy, I'm keeping an eye on this guy this week, so we've run.
Here we go. Sorry about that. Hey, sorry for keeping your man. Yeah, he's an awesome guy. Man.
So we're
having stuff to do.
So we're just kind of having like a bros night out tonight. Yeah. So we've after church, so we've got some other stuff planned after podcasting, which we're recording our show tonight for the Steelers Fix. So make sure you go and check that out. I know Jeremy already mentioned something about that earlier, but I know it's going to be a good show this week. So yeah. It's going to be good.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, we're diving into a bunch of fantasy football stuff on the Steelers Fix, which is just kind of a pet project of Andrew and mine, since we are fantastic fantasy football fans and players. We win every year. That's just kind of how we roll around these parts. Unless we're playing in the same league and then I win and he doesn't. That's just how it goes. But Andrew, we got a full comment section here. We've got everybody coming in to talk some Steelers. But until the questions start coming in, well, here's a fun question. let's go ahead and get this one up here. I didn't see it until just now, but we've got from Afton, who's a regular listener here. Does DHop going to the Titans change anything for your fantasy football team? Does it change anything for your fantasy football strategy?
It changes my fantasy football attitude because I spent about $100 on free agent Traylon Burks after our dynasty draft. So I'm a little bit disappointed about that. But other than that, I don't think it makes this big a difference to what some people are thinking. It's going to take a while to develop that chemistry. A lot of people forget the time that it takes for a guy who has been pretty much been non-existent throughout the entire offseason. Obviously, he's working out, staying in shape, I'm sure, but it still takes a lot of time to develop chemistry with the quarterback, and we don't even know if Ryan Tannehill is going to be the starting quarterback the entire season. So I think overall, I would be a little bit concerned about him from a fantasy perspective. I'm not sure what his ADP is going to be at. We'll see in time to come, but off the top of my head, if he's there in maybe the 8th, 9th round, which I kind of doubt he will be, but that would be the range where I would feel comfortable taking him, just because it's going to take a while for him to get going, and then you have the quarterback uncertainty.
Yeah, you do. Tannehill has been obviously serviceable or better than that in Tennessee, but last year was kind of a drop off for him. He did deal with some injury, but you have to think that Titans offense isn't going to be the same as the ones we've seen recently as far as efficiency goes. Although adding a piece like DeAndre Hopkins, that can help for sure. If you're a fantasy manager, I would not spend I wouldn't say, oh, I'm going to take this guy a couple rounds early because, I just want to make sure I get him. Let him sit, and then if you get to a point where you just can't pass up on him, then maybe you grab that. What you got?
I just want to mention one thing in the comment section. I know someone was mentioning God wants you to be a good steward of your money, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, fantasy football fab money is fake. It's not real. I'm not playing with real money. I'm not playing for money, anything like that. Don't worry about it. That's all good.
Hey, there you go. Let's talk about this question here. We got from Steeler Chick 46. Will Joey Porter Jr. get signed soon? Yes, he will. Soon. We don't know when. Training camp, it'll happen before then, or maybe early during that portion. But these guys are on vacation right now. Andrew, it doesn't concern me too much. I had Jeff Hartman on last week, and same thing then. We weren't too concerned about it then. Are you concerned about it? Let's get your perspective on it, that Joey Porter Jr. hasn't signed yet for the Steelers.
I'm not worried about it. It seems like there's something around the league that happens like this every year. You always have those few draft picks that, why aren't they getting signed? I don't understand the reason why, but I really am not concerned about it at all. As long as he is in shape, ready to go, and ready to perform, I think that's all that matters. Not too worried about the contract. It's going to be a matter of maybe a couple $1,000s, but I'm not anticipating it to be a whole lot. I think we should all be excited for what Porter Jr. could bring to this team.
I totally agree. From just a schematic standpoint on defense, he's going to put the Steelers in position to play different types of defense when you pair him with Patrick Peterson back there and their different skill sets. And obviously Peterson's leadership is going to be invaluable to him. I wouldn't expect him to miss any time at training camp or anything like that due to contract negotiations. Joey Porter Jr. is going to want to be all in and ready to start with this team and just get rolling here. I mentioned at the top of the show that we had some signings like DeAndre Hopkins, and then Evan Ingram got a long-term deal as opposed to having to play on the franchise tag this year for the Jaguars. Those are two teams on kind of different spectrums here. You've got Titans trying to figure out who they are. They're kind of in a mini rebuild, kind of maybe like the Steelers were a couple years ago. They've got some pieces to be competitive, but I don't necessarily see them as a contending team in 2023. But then you've got the Jaguars making a move. And this is a team with an established offense, one of the best offensive minds in football. And you've got tons of weapons around an ascending quarterback, an ascending team overall. And so that brings me to the Pittsburgh Steelers and a question here that George asks us, and that is this one. This might be the biggest question of the entire offseason for the Steelers, and how it correlates to different players reaching their potential or being turned into superstars. When we talk about the kind of the topic for today, which was, bracing for the big unknowns of 2023. This falls right into that really good because this is an unknown. So far, it's not been great for Canada, but then again, you saw towards the end of the season kind of his vision start to take hold and the offense start to be a little bit more efficient, have an identity. Is that the Matt Canada we get in 2023, Andrew? Is this going to pan out for him, or are the Steelers looking a different direction in 2024?
I think the good thing, and I think we mentioned this a couple weeks ago on the podcast, I think the good thing about having a local guy in Kenny Pickett, a guy that Art Rooney II wanted at quarterback, is that if there are struggles on offense, the team is going to opt for Pickett and they're going to make changes at offensive coordinator. And I think that's one of the benefits of having a guy like Pickett, because the establishment wants him to be around more than probably anybody, and definitely more than Matt Canada. So I think regardless of what happens this year, I do think that Pickett is a whole lot safer than Matt Canada is. But he has, I mean, there's no excuses at this point, right? I mean, am I forgetting anything? I mean, the offensive line that by mid-year should be amongst, maybe the top 10 to 12 in the league at the very least, I would think. And you've got a budding star in George Pickens. You've got Deontay Johnson, still a solid receiver. I'm not there to say he's the number one, but he's a solid receiver who's proven. And Allen Robinson, who's one of the most savvy vets in the league, not to mention Kelvin Austin, Hakeem Butler, a bunch of athletes in the back end. I actually just finished an article for the SteelCurtainNetwork.com. Be sure to go and check it out when it publishes. It's about 3 special packages the Steelers should utilize on offense this year. And if you have paid attention to some of the moves that have happened this offseason, especially on the back end of the roster, I think it's interesting, Jeremy, how the new front office has puts more value on athleticism, especially at the wide receiver position. We saw them bring back Miles Boykin. We saw them add Hakeem Butler. We saw them add Des Fitzpatrick in free agency as well. They like adding these athletes toward the back end of the roster. And that's something I like, because that there's that untapped potential that if they could go off, they could bring something more than just a depth piece, which is what they already are anyways. And I think it's interesting because based upon what the Steelers have, one of them, one of those special packages is
Andrew, are we back, man? I'm sorry, man. I lost you there for a second. So just keep going with what you were saying. I'll catch up.
Okay. No, you are totally good. So one of the packages that is talked about in the article is a jumbo package. I'm not talking about the run package, which that's in the article as well, kind of like what Dabo Sweeney would do at Clemson for a while. But another package when you get down toward the goal line on, say, 3rd and goal at the 7-yard line, having a package that would include George Pickens and Hakeem Butler on the outside, Miles Boykin in the right slot, Pat Freiermuth in the left slot, and then Darnell Washington just off the line to the right in a wide receiver stance. Pretty much a 5-wide set, but you got 6'7", 6'5", 6'5", 6'4", and 6'2" out there. Who's going to defend that size? Just throw it up there, and Pickett has the touch to be able to throw it, get it up high for his receiver to be able to high point the football. I think that is something that Matt Canada should utilize, because it's something that not every team has to offer. The Steelers finally have size and athleticism in this wide receiver room. Sorry for that long, lengthy answer.
No, that's okay. Ultimate box out potential there. You're right. Matt Canada has no more excuses. You just can't say that he does anymore. You don't have the aging vet quarterback that does things his own way. You don't have the rookie quarterback who doesn't know what he's doing. It's year 2 for a young quarterback, so there's going to be some growing pains still. I think we forget that. We just expect Kenny Pickett to come out and be Joe Burrow in year 2, and that doesn't always happen. There's going to be some growing pains. There were some growing pains for that Bengals team that went to the Super Bowl. They started out not great, and then started to put it together at the end of the season, started to look like an unbeatable team, and that's where things changed. But when you talk about Matt Canada's time here, is he going to pan out? This offense better be efficient. This offense better have some more explosive plays. It better score, north of 22 points a game for him to have a shot at coming back. It's got to be a reason that they win some ball games and not just just barely good enough to let the defense carry the team, that they've got to pull their own weight this season for Matt Canada to get his job back, I would think. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. Sherry Richards has a good question here. I guess we're not making a move at running back 3. Would you bring someone else in? Andrew, I know you like Anthony McFarland a little bit more than maybe most. I kind of feel the same way. Maybe he's fine as an RB3. He made Jim Wexell's breakout Steelers players list this last week. So take that how you will. But Andrew, what do you think about running back 3? Do the Steelers need to make a move here, or is that guy on the roster already?
I think both. That guy's on the roster already, plus it's an RB3. The Steelers don't use their RB3 outside of special teams really ever. So I don't think we need to bring anyone in. I do like Anthony McFarland. I think that he is capable of helping the Steelers in the return game if they utilize him in that facet. His issue coming out of college was that he was just too quick to the hole. He didn't let the game slow down. It was too fast for him at the beginning. And he didn't let the game slow down. And that's something that I'm hoping after a couple years of not being really relevant, that maybe he'll be a different player now, because we know what he's capable of. He's one of the most explosive, pure runners in the league when he's at his best. We just haven't seen that at the NFL level yet. But I do also like Jason Huntley. Everyone's talking about Alfonso Graham, but Jason Huntley is a guy who's had some success, limited success at the NFL level when he's seen the field, and he's got some serious speed as well. It's someone that I wouldn't mind keeping on at the very least the practice squad. But if something happens to Anthony McFarland, he would be my favorite personally as a change of pace option to the Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, who neither of which are really that fast. They're both good at what they do. And Jalen Warren, he can hit the hole with power, and he has some short area burst, but he doesn't have that distance speed to be able to break off a huge run.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, based on this kind of thought process here. If Najee Harris were to get hurt, or Jalen Warren were to get hurt and miss a couple games, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But like from a fantasy perspective, or just from like a team perspective, I would expect the team to go to kind of a bell cow running back type of situation, as opposed to bringing up RB3 to split the same amount of reps that the other two were doing when they were both healthy. I think also you're going to see Calvin Austin utilized in this running game a fair amount in the jet motion and jet sweep game. So, those factors kind of detail to me that the RB3 position for Pittsburgh is kind of emergency only. It's not like they're going to expect a lot out of him. You want a guy who can contribute on special teams probably. But for the most part, it's not like, this guy's going to be called upon to do a lot. Do you kind of feel the same way? Jalen Warren goes down, or Najee Harris goes down. The other guy in that scenario is going to get 90% of the work out of the backfield those weeks.
Yeah, I would agree, especially if it's Warren that goes down. But a lot of people are talking about how, it's going to be a more balanced backfield, and Jalen Warren's going to get his touches, and he might. But we seem to say that every year, regardless of who the backup running back is. And every year at the beginning of the year, Mike Tomlin goes back to his roots of workhorse running back, which for a fantasy perspective, I love. But I do believe for efficiency purposes, we may see Jalen Warren as the year goes along. But the Steelers have always, under Mike Tomlin, had a workhorse back. So I do agree with that. If a runner goes down, he's just going to give more to whoever the top guy remaining is, and just not include the depth guys as much. I mean, you could make an argument the Steelers only need to keep 2 running backs on the roster, because outside of special teams, they don't utilize anyone. You can add a 7th receiver. The Steelers have a bunch of receivers that keep a 7th receiver. I mean, that should be discussed, just because the Steelers don't utilize that 3rd running back practically ever. So, Fantastic stuff. I agree with you. Andrew, you are famous around these parts, at least in my opinion, for having a guy that on the fringe of the roster that everybody else is kind of like, he's there, nice. That you're always like, oh man, Steven Sims is Antonio Brown 2.0. I'm telling you right now, this is gonna happen. And he still could
give him a shot. Steven Sims. Who's your Steven Sims this year, Andrew? A guy that's on the fringe of the roster that is your surprise to make it and will be impactful. You got anybody?
I don't have anyone specifically this year. I mean, I would have said Corey Trice, but I think a lot of people have caught on to Corey Trice at this point.
Yeah.
I think you could see a guy. No, that's not going to happen. No. I'm trying to go through these in my head, and Trevor Downing is a guy I would keep an eye on as a guy who could not only beat out Spencer Anderson, but could potentially beat out Kendrick Green as well. I really like Trevor Downing. Had a really good collegiate career. He would be a guy I'd have my eye on.
Okay. Spencer Anderson, his flexibility along the line, that's going to help him, obviously. But we're all of a sudden looking at an offensive line group that is pretty deep, and it's going to be tough for one of those guys to make the roster. There's been a lot of talk about Cody White this year at wide receiver. Coming out of the Steelers, headquarters, and a lot of talk about him really being a kind of a different player this offseason. He's a guy I've always thought flashed ability at times. You've seen why he sticks around this roster, and it's not just because his dad's there. He actually has some skills and playmaking ability. It's just this team is so – there's so many wide receivers on this roster. What do you do with a Cody White? Maybe he's a guy that they would keep over a Hakeem Butler because he's more familiar with their system. He's been there, done that, and he's taken a step forward. Maybe he could beat out even, Miles Boykin. Yeah, specifically for this roster. I don't know, because Boykin brings so much to special teams, but this is a guy that you should watch if you're a Steelers fan, who's a fringe roster guy that's gotten a lot of hype this offseason and could be a player to keep an eye on as far as making this team and being impactful at some point, rather than just being a practice squad player. So that's kind of what I would do there. I wanted to bring this up from Steeler Chick 46. I am way more optimistic about this year's team than I was a year ago. Andrew, are you feeling the same way, or you kind of get a similar vibe as to last year? Maybe they're a little bit better, or is this we have the pieces now? If Kenny Pickett breaks out, or if this offensive line really gels, or Matt Canada's offensive system kind of just takes over and it all works, is this a team that has way more potential than just fighting for a wild card spot and maybe plucky enough to win one of them?
Yeah, I'm way more excited about the team this year than last. I think we may not have every piece to be a Super Bowl team yet. I still think linebacker and strong safety are a little bit suspect, but outside of that, the Steelers do pretty much have every piece they need. And if Kenny Pickett breaks out and he supersedes any expectations set for him based upon his talent and his profile coming out of college,
yeah,
I think we have enough pieces to where we could win a Super Bowl. I mean, you look at some of the teams. I mean, Kansas City does not have a complete team. They had a lot of holes on defense, even though they finished. They improved as the year went on. They were not a perfect team by any means, and they had questions at wide receiver even. But because they had a quarterback that was all world, it didn't matter. If Kenny Pickett can become all world, I'm not saying he is, but if he does, then yeah, the Steelers can go anywhere. But I do think that they are a team that is capable of being a team you don't want to face in the playoffs. I'm a little bit concerned just because of the lack of experience, especially on offense, once they get into the playoffs. But regardless, that's the next step for this team, getting into the playoffs, getting some playoff experience. If you win a game, great. If not, come back next year when hopefully the AFC won't be quite as deep and have a better shot at making a run at the Super Bowl.
Yeah, maybe these teams will get picked clean by the NFC a little bit in free agency next year. You never know. Yeah. Every year things can change. I mean, the NFC's got some up and coming teams as well that potentially could steal the spotlight. You're talking Justin Fields, over there. You've already got a guy like Jalen Hurts who has made the leap, but if he can put another year on top of what last year was, then you start to really cement yourself, if you're Hurts, as an upper echelon quarterback and not just a guy who kind of fit into something where everything was clicking. And then, I believe that he will do that. I'm not saying he won't, but you're starting to see the NFC establish some of these superstars at quarterback as well. And then when that happens, then you start to see teams bring in players to fill out the roster to add to these quarterback rooms. So very interesting stuff here. I want to answer this question before we take a quick break, because this is an awesome question to me. Vinny says, do you guys think Muth will be Kenny's favorite target? I already like their early chemistry down the middle of the field. Andrew, this has a chance to swing either direction for me, because there are so many playmaking options in this offense now. I mean, we've kind of talked about it, that the fact that nobody's really established themselves as a truly elite player. And then you got a bunch of guys though that are just really good players. You know what I mean? Then they kind of limit each other's ceiling a little bit. I think that unless you see like George Pickens or Pat Freiermuth, one of these guys really jump to that elite tier this year, then you're probably going to see a similar result as to where there's a lot of guys with 600 to 900 yards receiving in this offense, and nobody really jumping out to 1,400 yards like you see with Justin Jefferson or you see with AJ Brown last year. You know, the Steelers offense is kind of more designed to just kind of go to whoever's there, as opposed to really feed one receiver or one target. So I would kind of temper expectations a little bit on Muth being Kenny's favorite target and getting a lot of looks from him. Although I do think their chemistry can be a big deal for the Steelers. I think that their ability to connect on the money downs and even in the red zone, where we saw him be really successful, especially his rookie year, if he can reestablish kind of that chemistry with Kenny in year 2 of them together, then I think that he has a chance to be. But I would just say, you know, overall, if you're drafting one of these guys in fantasy thinking it's big leap time, just make sure you go into it with the right expectations, or understanding what the floor here is, because it could be a good season from Pat Freiermuth is still 700 yards receiving, 800 yards receiving, and you know he's not going to break out into Travis Kelce, George Kittle, you know, one of these guys who can threaten for 1,000 yards receiving each year. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're going specifically by targets. I mean, Deontay Johnson had 147 targets last year. Pat Freiermuth had 98. So when you look at by purely targets, I don't think it's possible that Pat Freiermuth is going to lead the team in targets. However, if you're talking about the red zone, I mean, we did see how much he was targeted in the red zone, especially I believe was it even in the preseason, Jeremy, where we saw Pickett look into Freiermuth a lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, even as time went on throughout the season, we didn't maybe see a bunch of, you know, touchdown numbers. I'm looking at Pro Football Reference, and I want to make sure this is the correct year, correct everything. But according to their numbers, he only had 2 touchdowns last year. But he did have 732 receiving yards. So, you know, he doesn't, just because he's favorite target, I get this, that doesn't mean he has to lead the team in targets. But if you're talking about trustworthiness in the red zone, absolutely. There's no one on the Steelers, rookie, non-rookie, George Pickens, anyone, that I would rather have being targeted in the red zone than Pat Freiermuth. He's proven at this point. He has become a very, very good tight end when healthy. As long as he can keep away those concussions, Steelers have themselves a good tight end. Regardless of what Darnell Washington turns into, they can utilize this guy for the next decade. He doesn't have to become Travis Kelce to be, you know, that to have the same value that Travis Kelce has to Kansas City. If he can be that reliable guy in the red zone.
The Steelers are going to run an absolute ton of 12 personnel in the red zone this year.
So we hope.
Yeah, I mean, they better. that's kind of how they've set it up here. Along with that, and when you were explaining your kind of your position groupings that you were looking at potentially being a big deal for the Steelers this year, I don't know if you mentioned this one or not, because we kind of had a spot where it cut out. But if you're at the 5-yard line, I know a lot of people are like, you know, Deontay Johnson had a down year. He didn't score a touchdown. That's definitely going to change this year. Yeah, it's probably going to change. He might score a couple.
Yeah.
But when you're at the 5-yard line, it doesn't seem superbly responsible as a play caller to put Deontay Johnson out there when you could have Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, George Pickens, and Allen Robinson on the outside, unless you're going to run 5 wide or something along those lines and put a third receiver out there. What's you going to do? Are you going to put the little guy out there? And I'm not saying that he doesn't have a place in goal line because of his quick separation skills. He can get open quick. That's a strength to play to. But if you're expecting a massive jump from Deontay Johnson in scoring, they didn't set that up this year for that to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see for sure. Andrew, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll answer more questions. We'll chat it up just a little bit longer before we head out on this Steelers Sunday night Q&A. But don't go anywhere. If you're on the audio side, we'll be right back. If you're watching live, we're not going anywhere. All right, we are back on the Steelers Sunday night Q&A. Andrew Wilbard joining me here to discuss all things Pittsburgh Steelers. Andrew, we got the Cherry Band in the comment section, and he does all of our intro music for the podcast. So thank you, Jerry, for hopping in and listening in. Here's a question, Andrew. It's kind of more of a comment, but it makes a lot of sense to me that there's certain teams, certain situations where the Steelers are going to have to be more than smash you in the mouth, try to hold you under 20 and score 23 ourselves to win this game. We saw that in the tail end of last year against the Bengals, where the Steelers kind of were playing catch-up all game. Yeah, they scored 30 points, but they still gave up 37 to Joe Burrow and the Bengals. You've got to be able to score points when it counts against some of these really good teams in the playoffs. If you want to win playoff games, you've got to score points. This team has to be able to score 27 points or more in a shootout, says Steelers Freak. Look at the postseason scores. What was the Super Bowl score? He's got an excellent point. Andrew, what do you think that threshold is? I don't think it's 27 points anymore. I think it's 30 points against some of these good teams. You got to be able to score 30 or more points in most situations when you're playing the elites to be able to hang with them. What do you think?
I agree. I think 30 points is the threshold now. I think it's been that way for a few years, really just looking at everything. Because when you think of shootout, you think of 30-plus point games. Because when it's in the 20s, I mean, the way offenses move and just the way the game is played now where all the rules are against the defense, it's very difficult. I mean, going back to fantasy football, all my leagues, I've adjusted the scoring for team defenses based upon the points given up. I mean, it used to be, was it -1 if you give up 28 to 35? Now I just have it as 0 or whatever, because I don't think you should get negative if you're giving up 28 points. If it's against Patrick Mahomes, 28 points may not be too bad if he's on that day. So I think that all in all, I would agree with that 30 threshold. I do think that if the Steelers can control the clock like they hope to, and be able to run the football with an improved offensive line, I think that they can keep scores lower. But again, when it comes down to that 2-minute drill and they go down in 30 seconds and you got to score again, and then you give them time to get it back, it's going to run up the score that way too. So I can't disagree with that. I think 30 is the threshold for a shootout in today's game. I always say that football is like a geometry proof. I don't know, Jeremy, did you ever take geometry in school?
Yeah, but I most definitely blocked it from my memory, Andrew.
Yeah, I for the most part I have, and I'm glad. I hopefully will never have to use geometry again. But it's like a geometry proof. There's more than one answer, more than one way to get to your final answer. There's just there's different steps each way that you have to do to get to that point. Yeah. And there's many different ways you can do it. Football is kind of like that. There's not one exact formula you have to follow to win. But there's certain steps you have to follow along the way to be able to get to that specific answer that you are coming up with as to how to get there. And I think that's how it is. You don't have to score 30 points in shootouts, but in the modern day, it's probably your best shot. You want to be able to play defense, and I still believe defense wins championships, but I don't think it's defense meaning holding teams to 10 points or less in a game to win. I think it's holding them to below what their average is and doing enough to where your offense can control the clock.
Yeah, or making big plays in big moments when you just need that extra offensive possession because the scoring is up, just because these two offenses have each other figured out. That's why you pay TJ Watt all this money. That's why Cam Hayward is still such an impactful player. That's why you try to get an extension with Alex Highsmith, because these guys can impact plays in huge ways when the game counts and when the chips are down. I think back to a couple of years ago, 2018, I think it was, when the high-flying Rams and the high-flying Chiefs met on Monday Night Football and scored the most points ever combined in an NFL game. And you're like, man, this is like 56-53. There's absolutely no defense. If you just look at the box score, you're like, what on earth? Did both defenses just sit on the sideline the whole game? But no, there was massive, huge game-changing plays by defenses in that game. I think the Rams scored 2 defensive touchdowns in that game. So you're talking about the team that won, the defense still had to make incredible plays to keep them in the game. So when you say defense wins championships, it's the defense that can be impactful when it counts. It doesn't always have to be the defense that holds the team less than 10 points. You know what I mean? Yep. So you just got to, today's NFL, you've got to understand the difference between those. And, just because a team might hold scoring down doesn't mean that their defense is actually one that will win a championship game. It's which defenses can make plays when they're really needed to. Kind of in this vein, Pittsburgh Toddy 86 says if the Steelers can average 24 points a game, they'll be playoff bound. I kind of agree with that sentiment. That means they're scoring more than that a lot, this season. So that's a good point by Pittsburgh Toddy 86. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Chaz H says, y'all think Trey Norwood makes this team? Let's dive into the back end of the roster here again, Andrew. I think so. I like his chances. I think he plays well on special teams. But I like him more than most. I've been a Trey Norwood fan since he was drafted. So that secondary's got a lot of pieces to work through, but his versatility and his ability to play on teams could help him out. What do you think?
I'm going to go ahead and say no, just because I think Elijah Riley has the upper hand at this point. I think the thing working for Norwood is a little bit more versatility than what Riley has. But let's not forget the Steelers brought in Chandon Sullivan for the slot, potentially. Not necessarily what I would do because he can't tackle. But you have other options there. I mean, Levi Wallace, for crying out loud, he was a good slot in Buffalo. He could play the slot. I know that's not what the Steelers plan to do. Though, I mean, there's talks that, maybe Levi and Joey Porter could be on the outside and Pat Pete play the slot. But regardless of how they mix the corners, I don't know if there's enough value outside of special teams to really keep him on the roster. And I think Elijah Riley can fulfill that good enough. You have Miles Kilbrew, who's already a special teams ace. You still have DeMonte KZ there. And then you also have Keanu Neal. And the Steelers usually only keep 4 safeties. So unless he's going to be playing the nickel, I don't know where there's a spot for him on the roster at this point. So because of that, I'm going to say no. Best wishes to him wherever he ends up landing, or if he stays on the practice squad, I hope the best for him, but he's just hasn't seemed to improve since his rookie year. He surprised some people with his versatility that first year, but hasn't really taken a step forward since then, and that's what concerns me.
Yeah, you definitely have to have some concern with the fact that he seems to have plateaued a little bit. I just think that he has enough physical skills to be able to be impactful to a point, not really a guy that we've seen kind of grow in the mental side of the game as much. I think he can get outplayed sometimes, out schemed, and he needs to get better in that regard. So it really could go either way. The Steelers will have an absolute ton of decisions to make coming up shortly. And I think they changed the rule again, Andrew, where you don't have to release players until I think it's after the 3rd preseason game. But when you do, it's like a whole load of them at once, going from 90, I think it is, down to 53. So there's going to be a lot of happy Steeler fans when their guy makes the roster. There's going to be some unhappy ones as well. We'll see how it goes. Sherry Richards says, going back to kind of another thing we were talking about. It's not popping up. Let's try again. Well,
believe is saying what happens with Tanner Muse. Jeremy, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but what I'm getting on this end is a loading signal. So I apologize if perhaps I'm the one. Oh, Jeremy is out entirely right now. So I will tell you all right now that are in the live chat, I am still learning how to get people up on here, but I will answer any questions let's see. Okay, there's Jeremy. Okay, praise the Lord. All right, I was getting worried there for a second.
No, how long was I off? I don't know what's going on. My internet must be really rough today.
So. It was just 10, 15 seconds, I think. Okay. I didn't get all of your answer. I heard you when you were talking about Sherry's question originally. I believe you were talking about what happens with Tanner Muse.
No, that's definitely something I was going to get to, but she was mentioning based on our conversation earlier that if we average 24 points a game, she thinks we'll go 12-5 and win a playoff game. I like that prediction. I really hope so. Just to kind of round things out from earlier conversation, but yes, let's talk about Tanner Muse. Andrew, you followed this guy pretty closely in the draft process a few years ago. What did you like about him, and do you think that he could find a place on this team?
It was a difficult evaluation because everyone had they were trying to figure out where is he going to play? Is he going to play at safety? Is he going to play at linebacker? But his athleticism was enough to get excited about. I mean, this was the 2020 draft, so that was the difficult year for evaluations. But I mean, the average person was going to say this guy's going to run a 4.4. That is about where he's going to play, but we never got, a speed on him. But if I remember correctly, measured in around 227 and he's 6'2". I think based upon the fact that Steelers don't have that sideline to sideline guy, I think he needs to make the roster. He's not big. I would like to see him add a little bit more weight because I don't like my linebackers below 230 ever, really. But this guy, he does have ability. He's more of a jack of all trades at this point, master of none. He never really hit his full potential in Vegas. But from the time he was drafted until now, there's been a lot of turmoil with that team. Yeah. And I'm wondering if just a fresh start with Terrell Austin, who's a proven defensive coordinator, who's worked with some pretty good linebackers. You can talk about Tahir Whitehead, other guys that they had, but that's just one that comes to mind in Detroit that Terrell Austin really worked with and turned into a good, solid NFL player. I'm wondering if he can do the same with a guy like Tanner Muse, different type player, but a similar position that he's going to be put in, and a guy who, if we see struggles from a Landon Roberts or maybe signs of aging, he could have a big role on this team, especially on third downs, nickel and dime packages.
Yeah, absolutely. His skill set is something the Steelers don't really have in their linebacker room. So when you can do something different, or you can do a lot of different things, then you absolutely have a chance to make the roster. So, Andrew, I wanted to kind of close this out since I'm having some technical difficulties. I don't want to risk blowing up again and losing my feed here, but I just wanted to bring it back kind of to the original discussion topic, which was bracing for the big unknowns of the season. We talked about Matt Canada a little bit. Is there anything before we go that sticks out to you as a big time unknown for the Steelers team that, if it works out positively, could be huge for Pittsburgh? If it works out negatively, could ruin their chances at being as successful as we hope they can be?
Are we talking specifically on offense?
It doesn't have to just be on offense. It can be anywhere. Yeah.
Well, on offense, I would just go with the offensive line just because we haven't seen them work together as a unit. There's high expectations, and there should be. But Broderick Jones was a raw prospect coming out. I hope that he gets a chance to start early on. But he was a raw prospect coming out, one of the more raw tackles in this draft, but a bunch of potential. Isaac Samalo, great for him. Personally, I would swap Daniels to the other guard position where he played in Chicago. But regardless to say, there's going to be some shuffling along the offensive line throughout the year. And I think that's a little bit of an unknown. But on defense, linebacker, if Cole Holcomb can become a near Pro Bowler like he was pre-injury, the Steelers have a chance to be one of the best defenses in the league. But if he's not, and the Steelers don't have that guy who can run in coverage, and Holcomb, I mean, he's never been a great coverage linebacker, but if the Steelers don't have that guy on the roster right now, if they want to make a run, they're either going to have to make a trade at the trade deadline for someone, sign someone else in free agency, or they're going to have there's going to be some long evening games that we're watching. We're like, oh, this is an embarrassment for national TV, because it could be really bad. That's a position I'm worried about, especially considering the fact Edmonds is gone as well as safety.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, some stuff along the defensive line. Sherry Richards mentioned what is Keanu Benton's impact. So that's a big question. I think you see the same for DeMarvin Leal. But to me, the big one is this one. The big unknown is Kenny Pickett. And so I want to see what Kenny Pickett can do. And if he's amazing, the Steelers team could be special. If he's a year away from being pretty good, if he's only okay, then this team's they're not going to be a contender for the Super Bowl this year. They might be still a good team. They might be a contender for the playoffs, but a lot of this rides on Kenny, and we'll see how good he is. I don't think he needs to be special, like top 3 quarterback, top 5 quarterback in the league for this team to be Super Bowl bound. But he can't be what he was last year, which was about the 20th or 22nd ranked quarterback in the league. He's got to be a little bit better than that. We got to see a jump. I'm hoping, I'm believing in it. We'll see how it goes, though. Andrew, anything coming up on the website? I know I've got an article running tomorrow at 7:30 about Kenny Pickett, so check that out. My thoughts on his role in 2023. Anything coming up for you, Andrew, you want to push here before we go?
The special packages on offense article that I mentioned earlier, be sure to go and check that out. And of course, as always, check us out on the Steelers Fix on Tuesday. We have a blast. Right now, we're talking fantasy football. It's going to be fun. Be sure to show up. Tell your friends. Tell a neighbor. Subscribe to YouTube. All the good stuff. But check out ffsn.app, steelcurtainnetwork.com, your new one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, that is our slogan.
You got it. All right. That'll do it for us here on the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. Thanks for joining us. As always, we'll see you next weekend here. It's been a little slice of heaven, as Dave Damashek would say.